Welcome to the Compromise to Alchemized podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Neil Bolton-Donnie. I'm excited as you join me in this journey to listen to my conversations with some of the leading experts in the field of healing from a broad range of disciplines. Greetings. I'm excited to do a brief intro for my podcast that I just did. Not a long one needed here, but I got in deep talking about my family legend and personal legend. So if you're looking for more insight on what the personal legend is, stay tuned or fast forward to the second half of the interview. But the first part really puts it in context. So I recommend listening to the whole thing. The family legend is a term I came up with that defines what a family does when they're living in sync with one another. But also for me, um, in order for me to really live out my personal legend, I need to make sure that I also know what my family legend is. There's a lot of ways to define family legend, and I've taken liberty to do that. But it is based off of Paulo Coelho's definition of personal legend, as so that I've ascertained from reading his book and also dwelling on it often, and also reading other people's thoughts on that. I also reference a blog article that Paulo wrote, like the 12 steps to fulfillment, that talk about how can you like take steps towards finding out what your personal legend is and living it. You could, I'm sure, take the same steps and apply them for your family legend. Although, anytime that you're involving somebody else, like your family, it's good to know what they think. And in this case, what my wife Dawn thinks. That matters. It matters. So, if you want to just hear my main thoughts, I share about how our family legend was involved with us moving to Santa Barbara, how it's involved with the way that we see raising our kids, and how speaking up matters, like in the case of Gaza. Then for my personal legend, we talk about my Floor of the Mouth tour. We talk about my history with expressive arts, my 5 M's that I created as a system of integration, my um, you know goals with spreading the floor of the mouth work, and it's the protocol that I came up with, but also teaching intuitive empathy. I talk about that and the ways that I will do that, and I also speak to like the unknown part of that. So I go into it, and I also just explain a little bit more on what is actually the personal legend is. So, and I define that close to the front. So please enjoy, and please let me know what you think. Okay, hello. I am excited to talk about some foundational concepts from my podcast that I sprinkle in there. And what I wanted to do is cover them in a little bit more detail so you all have a better sense of what I mean when I talk about them. Also, yeah, let me just say that if I didn't record this, it would feel like I was holding something back, meaning um, not just about the definition part. I like to explain and make sure whoever's tuning in gets the context of what I'm talking about, and also the depth, because like anybody, I want to be understood, but I also know that like whoever's tuning in, I want you to get where I'm coming from, the multidimensional aspects of what I set out to do with this part of my podcast, the compromised to alchemized version. And also, with that, what do I really mean when I say personal legend? But more than that, I set out to talk about this. I did like at least a half-hour recording where I talked about personal legend, but I I sprinkled in there saying I'll talk about family legend another time. Now, family legend is a term that I just, sort of I came up with, but to say came up with it is not really apropos. Paulo Coelho, as far as I know, is the one who came up with the term personal legend, and of course, it was featured in his book, The Alchemist, which is one of the muses of this podcast. Um, and he didn't say anything about a family legend, but personal legend. And then for me, I thought, what is my family legend? And other words you could use for that are like legacy. But that's what I want to talk about. I want to define family legend and personal legend because I realized when I went back and I listened to personal legend, my recording on that, it was so off the mark. uh, because for me, I really want to put my family first, and I'm included in my family, so it's really not leaving me out. Um, and I'll elaborate on that. I had some really good insight that led me to this. And one is always discussing things with my wife. But also it's the personal rumination on like what's really important to me. And then of course I could say I had a really amazing my counseling session. That was so good. Um, and let's just kind of say that's my best snapshot of why I took that off the publishing calendar, so to speak. Um, so yeah, so but I also know that I'm going to define them, but I'm also going to at least give you an example of what I mean by telling you what mine are. And that's definitely a lot. I mean, there's a lot to this. I have kind of given snippets of some of the things that I've been working on. I've even alluded to the shift towards certain topics, and we've done that. And And yeah, so this podcast for me serves as a place where I get to feature others, their work, their passion. I mean, really, their personal legend is coming through. I've asked more about that. And for the most part, if the people who are on have been healers who, do that in various ways. Um, and there's so much to say about getting this concept out there, not just for healers, but for any of us, right? And I want to also say that um, that anytime I meet someone that might say that like you might meet a healer who's more a maker, right, or who's more a scientist, or who's more a they actually their passion is something totally different. It could be like some kind of it could be another kind of making like artwork. It could be surfing. It could be anything. And that's so I really am excited to broaden the term when I've said that where I interview healers, because I think we're all in it for sharing or seeking healing. Um, but I feel like healing requires a broad range, a breadth of like resources, and even in that, um, how do we know that we're actually acquiring that? How does it show up for us? So that's actually why I think it's really helpful to talk more about personal legend and family legend is because it's like, yeah, are we feeling better? Hopefully. But in what context? In for what purpose? And, you know, how is it serving our greater purpose? So yeah, so if I can dive in right there, that would be an exciting place. And I definitely want to make sure I'm staying on time because I've got someone coming in for a session soon. Um, so let's just say I want to do another, you know, description, and maybe that'll be more webinar style, where I do a lot of schematics and show visuals. I mean, because some of this is really about that. But I want to give the quick version of everything so we can really jump in. And then I'll spend a little bit more time unpacking some things, but just know that this is going to be a snippet. Personal legend, Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, he refers to the boy Santiago pursuing his dream. And the book is so dynamite, so I recommend reading it. But it's about his destiny, his calling. There's actually a really cool blog entry on Paulo's blog, his website, where he has like 12 keys. I'll read those a little later. 12 keys to like pursuing your personal legend. Um, but for me, like the quote that I love along with that is, and I think this is when it's either the alchemist or the Melchizedek. I should know this one, but I believe it starts with the king, the old king, sitting on a bench. Um, a mystical figure appears to Santiago and says, when the universe conspires in your favor when one is pursuing his personal legend. So to me, that says so much that um, some of you can tap into, like when you are following the flow of intuition and you're, kind of really pursuing what is where you need to be, what you need to do. The universe will conspire in your favor, and definitely there's many times when we can think that didn't happen. So it's not to say I have it all figured out. So personal legend, we're talking about that. So for me, that brings up a really good point that I felt was helpful for me. Um, because I do love calling your like a personal legend is like a synonym for a destiny, a calling, that which you're passionate about. But when we say the word legend, that connotes something different. And for many years, I've really loved the art of map making. Not that I've made many maps and random sketches and note taking. And often when I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I need to do this month in all the ways, right? For family, for um, work, and all the different places I'm seeing patients and the places I'm traveling to within California, or sometimes like next month, I'm mapping out August. I'll be going to Chicago for my Floor of the Mouth tour training and a couple other supplemental events, one with Jesse Coomer, which is on breathwork. Anyways, I need to see it, right? I like digital calendars and I need to use those more, but I like to be able to draw. I like the pen, the ink from the pen. So for me, I need that, maybe I should just. I didn't actually intend to show this part because it's not well done, and I just take a photo of this share screen way better. But for anybody tuning in, this is my visual, for that, right? So we have just the simple. There are the days in the month, and the symbols are like what's happening that day where I'm in LA, and then my anniversary with my wife, and the days that I'm in, Orange County, and anyways, the days I'm traveling, my niece Glorielle's birthday for 1 year birthday, my son Zephyr's 13, they're on the 13th, he's turning 5. So I have like these little symbols that show me on the map what I'm doing. So that's a legend because you can look at it's usually a visual representation of what's going on. Let's say in this case, it's a month. It's a map of my month, right? That could be a geographical map. It could be a passion or a, you know, goal map. In this case, it's a very linear thing that I'm showing. It's just the days of the month. And what am I doing those days? How can I make sense of that? So I can figure out how to, you know, cover my objectives, goals. So in that, you have the aid of seeing the visual. And so in one way, it's not even just that to have symbols instead of words. Um, for me, if we're talking a map and how I get, like when I went to Boise and I've never been there, so I was looking at the map often. And of course, when you look at a map, you look, if you're looking at a physical map, you're looking at like that little key, right? That key, the visual guide on the bottom right, often, and it might have like how far one place is to the other. And you translate that into, if it's like an inch, it's like this amount of miles. That's how you kind of know gauge distance. And so we can extrapolate, so many things from that and say, for me, the legend is not only where I'm at on the map, because you could just look at the map. How do I know what's on the map? Where, do I want to go to the green belt in Boise, which good friends, now Craig Clayton and wife Eliza Clayton, um, they were happy enough to like it was great to have some time to walk with them and show me the green belt, and they showed me around, and so I had some guides that helped me. But the legend is like a guide, and it shows you, like I said, where you're at and how to get to one, how far apart some things are from one another. So, for me, that's more than just what am I to do, even though that's a big question. That's a big concept of what is my calling? What is my purpose? How do I know where I'm at on the map of life, the map of my month in the other case? How do I know where I'm at? How do I know that I'm making progress, how far I've gone towards where I want to go? And that's what I really am excited to dig into more and more and more. It is very, like, let's say, abstract, as in, uh, not everybody needs these clear lines of demarcation of where they're at in their lives. But for me, I do really well when I have that. So I'll speak to that. But before I talk about my personal legend and where I'm at on my map, and whether I'm accomplishing what I've set out to accomplish, which I'll get back to, I really want to talk about family legend. For me, I felt the significance of this as soon as I was born. Right, born into a family, and I love my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, and relatives. And there's a lot to say about that family. And we could say, like, I was born into a family that already had a map. In fact, I can remember my dad, grew up in Illinois, and just any trip we'd take, we didn't have GPS at the time, right? We didn't have Google, so we had Rand McNally and bring out the map, unfold it, take over the whole, front of the car, kind of like, to the chagrin of us many times. It's like it's gonna block your view while you're driving, not safe. Um, but my dad knew the map so well. And like we looked at the map of like Chicago, and I'm like, whoa, I get lost in that. Um, but if we were traveling, on a road trip to Kentucky, or um, over to Hilton Head in South Carolina, we're gonna look at that map and we're gonna refer to it because we don't have another option. And that's only the only way where you're going. And you want to figure out what's the closest place that we can stop for, restrooms and or gas. That makes a difference when you gauge that incorrectly. So obviously we were scrutinizing that map a whole lot more. Um, but I can reflect on that as being a time when physical maps were so crucial. Um, and as were books. For me, this is still a value. We still have that as a value in our family. We still love paper things, right? So, so I think it's helpful to sometimes think about the way things originally were, as opposed to digitalized versions of everything. So, um, but yeah, I think the family legend for me is especially what I want to talk about is getting married, having kids. Now we have 3 kids, and we have, like, goals. We have, and I'll talk about that. And then I'll say my wife and I meeting each other, getting engaged, getting married, you know, and following our dreams. Like before we had kids, that is the beginning of our family legend. Um, and we tap into our families and draw the strengths, and but even that I want to like say, but it's especially once we started having children, you feel this sense of course we have legacy. We want to pass on our legacy. We want to provide for our kids. We want to create an environment. And so you could say, yes, this started before kids, and this can happen if you don't have kids. This could happen if you don't have a spouse. This can happen even if we're not talking about your family that you were born into, because I think there is something to, if you create a family legend, like if you create this resource for yourself, even if it's just in your mind, and you have those with whom you're journeying, whether you're a coach of a team or you've had friends for a long time, you have your crew, your posse. I don't even say that word, but you have your your tribe, your collective, your friends, and you know some people say family. You have this pack that you travel with. You have, an office where you have team, and like this could be applied in a lot of different ways, and a lot of people do already. But I really wanted to go back to Paulo Coelho's genius when he talked about when, like, the universe conspires in your favor when you are pursuing your personal legend. Well, I believe we could just say the same thing about the family legend. And so, an example of that for us is um, our family legend started us in Redding, California, started having kids. Well, we have three, right? They're 9, 7, and almost 5. When our 9-year-old was 1, about, we took a trip from Reading down to the coast here. We went to, like, multiple cities. We went to Ventura, and I mean, we had been to multiple cities and trips and all around California, but when we came to this area, we had really wondered if we were feeling the beckoning to move. So we traveled to Ventura, um, Santa Barbara. We stayed, maybe a night in Ventura, a couple nights in Santa Barbara, and then we, visited places around, and then we stayed in Carpinteria. We actually stopped in Carpinteria on our way back, and we got out, sort of at the beach, and there was just this moment where my wife she went to go read and journal and go to like a cafe while I walked on the beach with my daughter, getting her into a nap. Right, the ocean is the best sound machine, and we saw, people walking on horses. It was magical. We saw dolphins. My daughter fell asleep, serenity, and I walked the beach for like an hour. Happiest place I could be. So it was in that moment where, like, we were just wondered, is this where we're supposed to be? And so we really thought, are we moving here? We went back to Reading, and after that short trip, and soon after, we were able to buy our dream house. And you know, we were there. And then it was about almost 2 years ago where we were planning a trip to Santa Barbara, and um, we before we moved 6 months ago, we took about 4 trips over the last 2 years. There was a trip where we had our wedding renewal, our vow renewal at the beach. We try to do that every 5 years, and so this was a little later than that. It was 11 years after our wedding. So August 3rd, 2020 will be 2024, right? Because we were married in August of 2020, 2013. So, um, so we had our vow renewal at the beach with 2 sets of friends, and it was beautiful. And we just knew after that we were going to move here. So I'm talking about geography. Yes, like, we knew we needed to be here in Santa Barbara, but it was more than geography. It was feeling, uh, like, the um, I don't want to say gravity, but feeling the rightness of it, the sense that we were in the right place, right time. Um, we just knew that we felt at home. We looked around, we saw how happy our kids were at the beach, and right, and but it wasn't even about the beach alone. Um, and we have, like, these 2 great friends. We just saw them for celebrating our middle one. He's 7 now, Cypress's birthday. And so our good friends here, the Ivanitskis in Santa Barbara, and our other dear friends, the Shanesickles, who live in Topanga Canyon, that's only like an hour, ish away, hour and a half away. So we're able to hang out with these 2 families who have kids who journeyed with us, and we knew them from Reading, right? 8 hours north at least. And so it is about that. It is about that shared history. And yet it's not just that. We feel compelled by the area, not just the land, the sand, the water, the really um, sort of shiny and vibrant and, sought after place that Santa Barbara is, because that's not what compelled us. And in fact, I can't give you the words for what compelled us other than we were compelled. So we followed our intuition, and we made it our goal, and we accelerated our timeline as, my wife and Carrie Evenitsky and some that I know the concept too. We compounded the timeline, right? We aggregated. We sped up time in terms of what normally we would have thought our process would have taken, and we made it so that we would be here. Um, and our family legend, that was so, uh, in terms of what felt right, resonant. So that was a combination of following the what, the where, the why. Uh, there's so many things that I could filter in there, in that our kids have been part of Nature Rangers, which is an outdoor school. They're about to go to Farm to Table in Carpinteria, a farm school by the sea. Then they're have like a day of school at the zoo, like a beautiful zoo Santa Barbara has. Um, let's just say like that is in our family legend. That's there. Um, and so that's a little bit more about like that. So, and it can feel like I'm only talking about Santa Barbara. So maybe I'm gonna pan out to talk about a broader concept of, how do we know we're on the right track? How do we know in a in a family unit, um, when Dawn and I share, talk, hear each other, confirm with one another, have that rapport, we co-confirm. And yes, it's important to have others around us who are also seeing that, because we don't want to live in an echo chamber, even though two of us in an echo chamber is beautiful music, right? So I'm okay with that, but we'd rather have, um, it makes sense, and we're always looking for that. And of course, it is making sense on so many levels. The fulfillment is the number one thing. Um, so, but again, I said I want to go broader, because a family legend is not just about where one lives and what one does and what the family finds in fulfillment within itself. One of our biggest values is we're trying to always teach each other, learn from each other about how to be kind, right? So, boy, how many times a day do I say we say that? And how many times do I like have to check my voice, because am I being kind? My daughter will say, "Dad, I don't think you sound too kind there." I'm like, "You're right. I will calm down my harumphy voice so I can be kind. So when I'm asking you to be kind, I'm actually demonstrating it." And I'll just verbally process it like that when I catch it. And if I don't, I hope, um, I say right now, I hope my wife Dawn catches it, and I do. But it's not easy, right? So that's, in one way, very simple daily life. Um, Being together with our friends was another aspect of family legend. We want that for our kids. Um, and again, I think I'm wanting to go broader. And um, my wife is pursuing her PhD. She's entering into her dissertation writing phase, and she's writing about validation. And it's a it's a very, very layered, deep topic on, and she's approaching it from this perspective of the energetics of validation, healthy validation, right? So, um, her program, California Institute of Integral Studies, out of the Bay Area, is, which she's attended remotely, is a school of integration, right? The seemingly disparate parts of ourselves brought into one, so one whole. Uh, and so within that, her field is the transformative studies field, which is actually a combination of other fields. So most simply distilled down to talking about sociology, psychology. She's using haiku, however, to crystallize and distill her thoughts, but she's bringing, you know, participants through workshops where she teaches, and then has them write haiku, and it crystallizes their experiences. And we're talking about validation as a good thing. However, a lot of people go through life and they know the topic of validation really well because they never got it, or they were invalidated, a gaslit. Again, my wife is the expert on this, and so she is got some really revolutionary thoughts that I do believe are profound those anyone that knows her knows that. And now as her work begins to come together in a way, it'll be outward facing. I'm really excited for who will come across. I will read it. I need to learn more. So have two very different directions I want to go with this. One is the direction of personal legend. So I'll pause that. This is the direction of family legend. If I could devise another term, there's personal, there's family, and there's a global legend. Let's just say keep that in the family, right? Because aren't we all family? We all come from, right? So, I just shared, a story of Miss Rachel for Littles, who followed for years for her um, you know, speech language pathology resources, like one of the best educator for kids out there and parents on how to learn simple, you know, tips and tools for speech and how to process and have language development occur, especially when there are issues, especially when we see this in young little ones, but it's for anybody. And she's been speaking up about Gaza for a long time, and I've followed her. I've followed my wife Dawn, who's spoken up about it, not just because of what happened October 7th, but way before. Because let's just say I've learned so much from her, and we've so in one way to just touch on this is hard, but I also know that what I'm talking about is broader than that one topic. But just to potentially make it really weighty for a moment, it's in our family legend is to stand up for those who are being hurt, and it's never okay. I don't believe killing's ever okay. And in one way, you might be listening to this with kids, um, but usually we can just say fast forward. And I'm not going to talk that much about this, but even to say the word, you so we can just say that to see Dawn, my wife, to see a range of other people, Superhumanizers podcast, to see Miss Rachel stand up and talk about the genocide in Gaza. And we have dear friends from Palestine, and my wife has lived there. And um, to say no, I'm against, as I believe anybody that I just mentioned is very clear about this too. Nobody should be doing any of that. Nobody should be seeking the end of someone's life, nor uh, okaying it. So, any Israelis and any Palestinians and anyone else, right? That's not the only thing going on in the world. I 100% disagree with any harm. And right now, though, it's in our family legend to make sure we are standing up for, talking about. And I've been doing some very clear things like not drinking Coca Cola, because that's a very clear way that I can not support processes that are promoting or supporting genocide. Uh, there's a lot of other things that I could say that I'm not doing or that I am doing because of what is going on. But I'll end that part just to say that is the broad. But let's just say broader than that is to say that I believe that if I am to support others who are truly advocating for life and truly advocating for hope, um, we're gonna our rudder, our compass, our hearts. We're pointing in the direction that we want to be in to show love. Yes. So there's a little more on our family legend that I want to share, and um, it's like you're talking about something really weighty, yet it's real. And then also making sure we have levity, making sure we have joy, gratitude, and uh, celebration. It's to hold these topics is very hard because they're paradoxical and they live in tension. So, and I do think in one way that fits perfectly with compromise to alchemized. So, uh, w- in our family legend, what is our family legend? And because you could say, what is our family legend? I keep saying in our family legend, but in terms of our family legend, in this resource, which personally I have not made, but I have all these sketches. Uh, we have things that I'm very clear about, and yet each of our kids will speak into what aspect of our personal or our family legend uh, needs to like what is really our family legend. Uh, I just picture it like a balloon or a glove, right? Often I'm blowing up gloves to make them into balloons so kids can have fun with them, or sometimes I'll do that, not a lot. So it's like my wife and I, we blow up our, fingers, and there's handily in our family, we have 5 people, so then there's 3 other fingers. So each of our kids, can infill their aspect with the air, the inspiration that they are provoked by. So I do think we're going to see more of our family legend be fulfilled once we know what our family legend is, more so once they grow up into that and can articulate more, although they're very articulate. They speak their minds when it's handy and amazing, and when it's not handy, as a parent, you know what I'm talking about. Um, so I do see their personalities and characteristics infused into our lives. And um, but I think that's a pretty good place to go. So I'm going to shift into talking about my personal legend now, even though I feel like by talking about my family legend, I actually cover some of the most important parts of that. But to perhaps summarize is to live a life of passion and conviction, to support kindness, support you know, looking out for others with hope and advocacy. Um, Seeing my wife write about validation, but as that is, promoting validation, looking at the importance of it to ensure that we're seeing validation happen on a widespread scale. Seeing our kids flourish. Now, I didn't say what my personal legend was in the context of family legend because I'm going to talk about it more. But if I add that in now, one of the things that I know I am to do the most is to teach intuitive empathy. So I couldn't say teach intuitive empathy today on this podcast if I hadn't explained our family legend. Because not only does the term intuitive empathy have um, a lot to do with validation and actually the work my wife is working on and writing has a term within it called kinesthetic empathy. And I actually really want to learn more about that because from Dawn, because I was using intuitive empathy to describe the most um, multifaceted version of empathy. So then I'll define that here in a moment. But with actually, yeah, no, so empathy or the empathic realm is when you sense what others are feeling, right? So if you kind of feel other people's emotions, it is more of an emotional empathy. Um, and I'll just compare that to if you have intuitive empathy or perhaps kinesthetic empathy, you might feel in your emotions or feel in your hear in your thoughts, but also you may feel in your bodies, right? You may um, like if somebody walks in the room, um, I'm not just going to use visual cues to assess them as they talk and as they ask me to assess them. I'm going to do a lot of other things like palpation and but that's what, talking about in a session. But I'm also going to say, like, ooh, I feel that pinch in my right kidney. That's my clue that somebody might have a right kidney misalignment, especially if I'm working remotely. So kinesthetic and or intuitive empathy, that's one of what I feel are my greatest, uh, what's on my personal legend. Then, um, I'll kind of go into, we see with our kids, our daughter loves to dance very interpretively like I do. She loves singing like I do. Uh, and Our son Cypress, he's very witty, quick-witted like Dawn is, very ingenious like Dawn is. Zephyr, he's bright, light, remembers things uncannily, and like maybe that's a combination of us, or maybe that's better than us, and he has his own love of music and dance. So let's just say that there's strands there that I see coming from us and also adding to us. So maybe I should just jump into personal legend, and I'll say, ooh, there's too much to talk about. I will now like reference other people. Um, uh, I feel like talking about my family legend just sets things off in the right direction. Um, Particularly, even talking about the anniversary. My wife and I have, Dawn and I have our um, 12-year wedding anniversary coming up on the 3rd. So there's a sweetness to that where I can feel settled and grounded in the continuum of our relationship and talking about the things that are dear to us. Uh, and there are more things I did not go into. Even if you think I dove deep, no way. There's way more. There's so much more to the family legend concept, and it, this was a very light, easy, personal version of that. That's got more depth coming. So, but this, let's just say, is a intended to be a really detailed explanation, so you can really feel and understand where I'm coming from. So, let's say now it's time for personal legend. So, you've probably heard me say my personal legend is the floor of the mouth tour, right? Teaching the floor of the mouth protocol that I created this year, 2025. That's my goal. That's my mission. So I have kind of like an asterisks or a subcategorization of my personal legend for 2025 is floor of the mouth. You could say that spills into 2026 because I have at least 2 speaking engagements where I'll be speaking about the floor of the mouth. I'll actually be more talking about the floor 4, which is a distillation of my floor of the mouth protocol, and I've distilled it into 4 key areas, main areas of the body that are involved with floor of the mouth. That's going to get out there, so I'm excited. I have a lot of things in the works on how I'm going to spread the word on that globally. So let's just say what I'm setting in motion, it's going to continue on in 2026. But I'll take a sip from my compromised to alchemized mug, and I can show you personal legend. And because you gotta sip freshly and take it in. Um, yeah, when I'm looking at fulfillment, and I've had a return to talking about creativity, the arts. And you've heard me talk about this in some of the intros, but uh, interviewing Trisha Rogers talking about Miss Tongue and Friends. I interviewed Holly Deval at Holistic Alchemist, and then we're actually soon a couple more. We're going to be talking about fluid art and the workshop she's taught, and more than that. I'll be doing an interview with Rosario Sammartino, who I learned from at a somatic dance workshop at the Tamalpa Institute. Um, I think it was 2017, and it was near San Rafael, the Bay Area, and on the life art process. And that was very much parallel to the creation of my movement practice that I taught, which was about intuition and the merging of expressive arts with that. And so my own system that I created called Move Into It at the time, and I taught that in multiple places. Um, that's a lot of where my ideas have come from. A lot of the clarity and the tuning in that I was able to do to create my airway map, to create for the mouth protocol. Yes, my daughter having a tongue tie, and that was huge to realizing that. And even the you know, I would say the the things I was doing after that in practice and body work and delving into fascia, working on organs, cranial bones, some of that I was doing before, some of that I carried on. They were all ingredients of how I came up with floor of the mouth protocol in the airway map, but and data analysis, and there's such a process there. But how did I know where to look and what to do? And there are those times when those things didn't work, and I had to rely on the whispers and the intuition of finding where not only in the body people were having issues, but in their environment, in their surroundings, in their psyche, and in their external environment. So that takes like tuning in. So um, the practice of the expressive arts, the practice of, and what do I mean by that? To briefly go into the expressive arts, often it can involve things that are expressive, like singing, art, like painting or sculpting. Um, you could have, any kind of music aside from singing. That's what I already mentioned. So you could say anything that involves an expression into an art or an art form, or even for me, writing, journaling. That's a huge. Meditating is as well, but let's just say that meditation, while it's powerful and profound, and it can look like a lot of things, in and of itself is not an expressive art. So for me, I really look at those two as a thing to synergize. I'm going to mention too many things, I feel, but I will say for me, my 5 M's that I created, which was just before my daughter was born, of movement, mapping, um, musing, meditation, and music, having those 5 M's into a practice, which I can do 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 5 hours, whatever I have. Um, it's the way that I can weave in and out of those things that helps me connect my brain and my heart in my being. Um, so for me, that's been a great tool, uh, and yet that's a really good ecosystem for the expressive arts to manifest. But then it takes surrendering to the moment and allowing expression to lead versus a process or a protocol. That's what the floor of the mouth protocol is. It's just a protocol and a process, but you need to surrender to what is going to work in the moment, and then you see it happen, and then wow, that just happened. Anybody who's been on my table or I've worked on you, you've known this feeling. Um, it's very distinct. So let's say um, my personal legend is to teach that blend. I suppose you could say it's a blend of the 5 M's mixed with the expressive arts, mixed with a keen awareness of who you are. But teaching intuitive empathy right now happens through my floor of the mouth tour trainings, and I get excited about the ways that I'll teach it beyond that. And I mean, as soon as 2026. So stay tuned for that. And for me, I pull on deepest passions. One of those is talking in an interview format. Right now, I'm not doing that. I'm talking to myself, but I'm aware of who you are. So I would, get out an old AM radio that I would listen to, and then I think I would have a microphone or maybe not, and I would pretend to interview people. And I would, silly voices and do things. I remember that. That was for me early on. I love that. So yes, it's a lot easier to get a mic to start a podcast. How many of us are doing that? Gazillions, right? But for me, it's actually, I'm I've been pursuing this, and I am going to keep pursuing this because I feel compelled to do it. So that's a way that I feel creatively alive. Is the spoken word. Um, then you have singing. That's why getting to interview Eddie Horowitz was a brilliant thing because he's a wonderfully gifted singer. And I have enjoyed the craft of song for many years. I sing all the time, and let's just say that is a huge part of my personal legend and as a lifetime. Um, and we can also say that being a movement artist, in if I get lost in movement at one of my workshops that I'm teaching, or in my own at home time or wherever I'm at time, I'm getting lost in movement in the interpretive way, and um, goes back really far in time for me. And so that's one of the most significant ways that I express. I do express a lot through writing, hence mapping, uh, and I've done that, and I've written poetry, since very young. So, at least 30 years. So for me, those are the arts, um, meditated, and it's dear to who I am, and they're always going to stay with me, and it's a very important part of who I am. But as my personal legend would say, that the universe conspires in your favor if you are pursuing your personal legend. But that if is big, right? So for me, I need to consider the if, examine the if, and put it under a microscope, put it under a high level of scrutiny when it's time to do that. Because if I'm not pursuing my personal legend, then, will the universe conspire? Will God conspire in my favor? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, that's a sort of glossing over the topic. So I want to kind of finish up here in the next couple of minutes because, if you're still listening, congratulations. If you've made it this far, you've made it. Uh, and so my personal legend is has to measure these things that I'm talking about. Like, my personal legend cannot live in a conflict or in an antagonistic way to our family legend. There's been many times I've thought I was supposed to pursue something, and I didn't because it didn't match our family legend. There are other times I did, and I learned not to do that because it doesn't work well. If I know our family legend and what we're destined for, then I will stick to the things that actually take us further in our family legend or that fit into it. So that's how I talk about personal legend. It's not that my family defines who I am or that I define who they are. We co-define, we define each other. It's not, we just say it's not codependency, it's co-leading. And Don and I have co-led. Let's just say I'm working on areas that I need to do better at that with, and we've been co-muses, which is co-inspirers, um, and our family exists in its best form when all of us are playing a role. And in my life, unless I am playing my role fully, we cannot do well as we would otherwise, and I cannot do well as I would do otherwise. So, my personal legend, I mentioned in our family legend, it's designed by those leading, which is Dawn and I. In my personal legend, it also has that same dynamic. It's Dawn and I, B and Dawn leading the way, but then I'll add to that of like those with whom I'm journeying, collaborating with, huge value. So, I want to name all of you. I will mention Nicole at Santa Barbara Mayo. I will mention, um, you know, back in Reading, Rachel Barnhart, the dentist. There's just too many people to mention, and I'll also mention, um, in Woodland Hills, getting collaborate with Ina Henry, and in Agora Hills, Dr. Tim Yu, and many collaborative moments with Dr. Zagi. And then again, like I'd say, there's so many more people with whom I've collaborated in my Floor of the Mouth tour, and those with whom I'm going to be collaborating upcoming in Chicago. So, y- you know, that's a big deal for me. Um, that am I pursuing my personal legend? And sometimes I have to gauge, am I doing this thing well? Whatever it is I'm doing. Right now, it's the Floor of the Mouth tour, and I have other projects that I'm working on and connected to that and not connected to that, that I love. And um, am I doing those well? And it's not that I need to put people into a place of, unless I'm doing something with that person, I'm not doing well. It's more that, um, y- when I had my first Floor of the Mouth tour event in Reading, and I asked Melissa Mugno, um, Suraj Vatish, and Eric Galindo to be speakers remotely. Like, I did that out of friendship with them and a desire to collaborate with them. And I had met two of them, and I had not met Eric. I still haven't met Eric in person, but he's been on my podcast, and I felt the resonance, and I feel that vibrance, and I feel, if I am doing this, if I am pursuing my personal legend, the universe will conspire in my favor. And again, I could speak about universe in much more concrete terms. I could talk about God. I could talk about friends and collaborative people. That's it's all in there. So I would say yes. I I do really get excited about the fact that in this journey, which is very parallel the family and personal legend, I keep seeing the unfolding. Another concept from Paulo's book is, when you're pursuing your personal legend, the hand that wrote it all, you know, that's how he refers to God. I love that. You'll hear talk about the hand that wrote it all. And actually, what I want to do is quickly read from the blog. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll read this. Uh, Maybe we can leave this in the show notes. It's called "The 12 Steps to Fulfillment." So this is a great article to share. So basically, uh, he talks about Joseph Campbell, um, and he talks about Alan Cohen. So he's referencing these two people. I'm just going to call them two people because that's all I'm saying here. Um, but let's just say, if you see Paulo's article and you say, what are some ingredients towards finding out your personal legend? First of all, for me, it's dig deep, follow your intuition, seek God, you'll know, right? And meditate, pray, move, all those things. Number one. That's my do my 5 M's. Yeah, that's even better. Come to, Santa Barbara and do an embryology intensive. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. You don't need to do that. Number one, tell yourself the truth. Number two, start slowly but start. Number three, stop slowly but stop. Five, begin to choose. Six, don't base your decisions on financial gain. Seven, follow your intuition. Eight, don't be afraid to change your mind. 9, learn how to rest. 10, let things show you a happier path. 11, read the signs. And 12, finally, take risks. So I will share that. And that's where I want to end, is follow your personal legend. But more than that, make sure that that lines up, first of all. And then two, make sure it lives in accordance with your greater world around you, the people with whom you're in this journey with. And I said with there twice. But my wife talks about this concept called withness, when you're really with someone. Are you really there and present with your witness? So that's the extra with right there. So, um, yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Till next time.
In these conversations, we do deep dives, and resources are aplenty. So please tune in and enjoy. And I'm so excited to have you along for the journey.